Well, as Laker fans or simply NBA fans, we might not agree on everything, but I think we can all agree that the Lakers need a center. That's obviously a big part of why they're not playing at this point. Their combination of lack of size, lack of having a reliable rim protector, or simply a reliable big in general, that's something you can definitely point to. So with that in mind here, to absolutely no surprise here at all, that's at the very top of their priority list. Rob Pelinka's talked about it, they're not hiding it, and they're definitely going to go after 1, 2, or maybe even 3 bigs this offseason. But who can they actually target? Who do they have enough money to go after? And who are their best centers on the open market that would actually be a good fit for their team and actually worth the price tag? We'll talk about that and try to break it all down here. But before we get too far into it, don't forget to check out G2A.com. They got your best new games, gaming discounts, PC software, and much more. So be sure to check them out in the video description down below. But now getting back to our topic. And like I said, the Lakers definitely are going to go after a center, but who can they actually target on the open market? Can they sign a guy like Miles Turner, for example? Well, unfortunately, probably not. I mean, we're talking about a guy that made over $20 million last season, and at the absolute most, their biggest contract they have to offer is only worth about $14 million next season. So gotta be realistic, albeit optimistic here, but we gotta talk about the guys they actually can target and who would be a good fit and worth the price tag. So we're going to talk about both veteran minimum options for their team, kind of the bottom of the barrel, but potentially a good backup for their team, and then talk about guys that they could sign if they get the taxpayer mid-level exception, worth roughly $5.6 million next season, or then for a best case scenario, which likely would require a LeBron James discount, if they would get the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, worth roughly $14.1 million next season. But beginning with the veteran minimum options, maybe not your favorite options, but potentially some good bargain options that could be a good backup for their team. And beginning with an absolutely great lob threat, that being Jericho Sims. I mean, simply put, the guy can jump out of the gym, recorded a 44.5-inch vertical jump at the 2021 Draft Combine, one of the best vertical leaps of all time, and definitely the best one for a near 7-footer. I mean, no matter what way you look at it, the guy can absolutely jump, and for a guy like Luka Doncic that wants to play with a lob threat, Jericho Sims might be a pretty good fit. Now you definitely have to look at more than simply a lob threat, but he definitely does have that part covered. Is a great vertical leaper, is a great lob threat, can be a great pairing for a guy like Luka Doncic, and that would definitely be fun to watch between them in the pick and roll game. But even apart from that, does have a little bit more to offer, albeit not a ton more to offer. Is not a 3-point shooter, is not a great switchable defensive big man, isn't a particularly great rim protector, albeit not a bad rim protector, but he is a pretty good rebounder. Has a career average of 10.5 rebounds per 36 minutes, including grabbing about 4 of them per game this season, in only about 12 minutes per game, which only got better after he got traded to Milwaukee. And well, if he can play for a contending team like he showed up until this point, only playing for the Knicks and Bucks so far, then he probably would be a pretty good fit for their team in that regard, not playing anything more than probably 10 to 15 minutes per game, but likely all of them, if not a big majority of them, with Luka Doncic, pairing that lob threat and great alley-oop passer together, giving him a good rebounder for more kickouts, giving them a simply athletic big that, although they have in Jackson Hayes, even more athletic with Jericho Sims. Yes, believe it or not, that's actually possible, and I think he'd be a pretty solid backup for their team, especially for a veteran minimum contract. But then for option number 2, maybe a guy like Charles Bassey. Not probably someone you've heard of and definitely not a well-known player, but a guy that the Lakers definitely could sign and probably benefit from signing too. Likely would be able to get him for a veteran minimum. Didn't play that much last season, but when he did play, he actually was pretty effective, especially in regard to rim protection and rebounding. Last season grabbed about 4.2 rebounds in only 10 minutes per game, aka roughly 15 of them per 36 minutes. So yeah, the guy can definitely grab boards, is a very tenacious rebounder, fights hard around the rim, both for rebounds but then simply for positioning around the rim. Maybe isn't the biggest guy or the biggest center out there, is 6'10" but could weigh a little bit more, is roughly 230 to 240 pounds, but no matter what way you look at it, is a very hard worker around the rim. And then on top of that, is a good defender and a very good shot blocker. Up until this point, having a career average of 2.8 blocks per 36 minutes, definitely has good timing around the rim, not simply a good shot blocker, but actually a pretty good defender. My only one gripe and one minor complaint with him would be fouls, having about 5.4 of them per 36 minutes, so kind of reminiscent of Jackson Hayes, only he's a much better shot blocker and simply has better timing on defense in my opinion. And then finally, is still only 24 years old and definitely showing improvement, could potentially be their long-term backup, and that's something they have not been able to find for quite some time now, so maybe taking a look at a guy like Charles Bassey or Jericho Sims and they could potentially find that. But then for our third and final veteran minimum option, probably the most unlikely one, but potentially the best one, especially for a win-now team like the Lakers, that would be Luke Kornet. Currently playing with Boston, and that would be a pretty good team to have to leave, but if the Lakers would offer him significantly more playing time or a significantly bigger role, after all he is currently a backup and does kind of get sporadic playing time, maybe they could lure him away from Boston. And if possible, that would definitely be an upgrade for their team and especially on defense. Compared to Jackson Hayes, Kornet is superior defensively, especially in regard to rim protection, having a career average of 2 blocks per game per 36 minutes, last season averaging 1 block per game flat, in only about 17 minutes per game. And then on top of that, having a career defensive box plus minus rating of plus 1.1, which is pretty darn good. Maybe not the most mobile big of all time, but can switch a little bit, has very good timing on defense, does not foul that much, is a reliable rim protector and a pretty experienced one too. And then on top of that, is not a bad offensive player at all. Unfortunately, he doesn't take threes anymore for whatever reason. Earlier in his career he did and actually was a very good 3-point shooter. Back in 2018-2019, shot 36.3% from 3 while taking 4.2 per game. So if Kornet would ever get back to that or go back to that, that would be an obvious benefit, but even without it, does remain very efficient offensively. During the past 3 years combined now, shooting 68% from the field, has a really good push shot, very good touch around the rim, can even dump it off to him around the rim and he can finish over defenders, which is obviously helped by the fact that he is 7'2" and has a fairly good wingspan with it. But even on top of that, is a good lob threat, has good hands around the rim, and simply put is fairly reliable on both ends of the court, which in my opinion would make him a great option for a veteran minimum contract if they could somehow get him for it. But now moving on to our taxpayer mid-level exception options, worth again roughly $5.6 million next season, more than a veteran minimum, albeit not quite as much compared to the full mid-level. And at this price, I'd take a look at a guy like Day'Ron Sharpe for example, a very good rebounder, kind of resembling a mini Andre Drummond in my opinion, both from a playstyle and even kind of a rebounding numbers standpoint too. I mean, up until this point, having a career average of 14 rebounds per 36 minutes, being an absolutely tenacious rebounder, never forgetting to fight for plays and keeping them alive on the court, being a very physical player, especially around the rim, which is not overly surprising given his 265-pound frame, definitely knows how to use it, gets great position down low for rebounds, is a very physical defender, albeit not the most switchable defender, is a pretty good rim protector, averaging about 2 blocks per game last season per 36 minutes, is a great defensive rebounder, would give him a lot more toughness on the court, and then on top of that, is only 23 years old and could potentially be their long-term backup, or maybe even eventually starting big man. Continuing to show improvement, is even trying to develop a 3-point shot, that would be great if he could ever get that. Again, obviously is a great offensive and defensive rebounder, pretty good touch around the rim, is a decent lob threat, albeit not comparable to a guy like Jericho Sims for example, but he can be a lob threat, pretty good pick and roll partner, definitely knows how to keep plays live again, and then with him being only 23 and continuing to show improvement, I think he would be worth that price for them. But then for our second option, and actually for an unrestricted free agent, here we could take a look at Clint Capella. He's declining and definitely not improving like Day'Ron Sharpe, but I think he would be a pretty good value at this price. Rather than having him at his previous salary of $23 million, offering him about $5.5 million would definitely not be too bad. After all, he does remain an elite rebounder, averaging about 8.5 of them per game last season in only 21 minutes per game, averaging out to 14.5 of them per 36 minutes, which also happens to be his career average, and that's absolutely elite. And then on top of that, does remain a good lob threat, Now, I wish he had better hands, and that's kind of the fatal flaw with him, but he does still have a great vertical leap, knows how to keep plays live, does have good timing in the pick and roll game, which he has done for about a decade at this point, and would theoretically be a pretty good partner with Luka Doncic. Again, definitely would not want him at that previous salary, but for only about $5.5 million, even with the declining athletic ability, declining defensive ability, and definitely declining rim protection, I think he'd still be a pretty good budget option at that price, and I would be willing to offer it to him. But then for our third and final option, another veteran here and even older than Clint Capella, but one that's actually better and continues to be a pretty effective center, that being Brook Lopez. Probably the most optimistic option and definitely at that price, but even held at 37, he would be worth it in my opinion. I mean, he's one of the very few bigs that can both space the floor and protect the rim at a very high level, shooting 37.3% from 3 last season, had roughly 5 attempts per game, and that's incredibly high volume for a big. And then on top of that, blocking 1.9 shots per game, ranking 6th in the entire NBA. So yeah, definitely a very good rim protector, not only last season, but pretty much for about a full decade at this point. Has great timing on defense, knows what he's doing, and one of the best drop coverage defenders in the entire NBA. Then with the 3-point shooting, one of, if not the best 3-point shooting big man in the entire league last season, as a true full-time 5, that could help their team as well. Now, he might not be much of a lob threat, but I think his 3-point shooting would and definitely would be a great fit with Luka Doncic. Their pick and pop game would be absolutely dangerous, can't double or even play a high drop coverage or hedge heavily off Luka Doncic, or Brook Lopez will get open for 3. So between all of that, if they could sign him for around a taxpayer mid-level exception, I'd definitely be willing to do it. But then finally for our non-taxpayer mid-level options, this would be worth again roughly $14.1 million next season, and would almost certainly require a LeBron pay cut for the Lakers to have access to. But if they have it and do have it available to offer, one guy to take a look at would be Steven Adams. Obviously played well in the postseason, showing he has plenty left in the tank and playing very well against Golden State, a team that often punishes opposing big men and kind of plays them off the court, but not Steven Adams. Often a guy that tends to play better in the postseason, kind of being called a playoff riser if you will, getting more from him and gaining that different level that he seems to reach in the most important games. That's one thing that you would get from Steven Adams. Then on top of that, obviously it would give them a lot more strength and toughness, one of the biggest and most physical guys in the entire league, probably the pound for pound strongest guy, and could maybe even get away with possibly getting him for less than the full mid-level, maybe offering him about 10 to 12 million rather than the full 14.1, and they still might be able to get him, albeit maybe don't want to take that risk with the Rockets having his full bird rights, but could potentially be an option. And simply getting him away from the Rockets, that would be a goal for them. Taking him away from a conference opponent and a potential playoff matchup, that's something that could benefit their team or any other West team for example. And then finally for his main benefit, that being rebounding, grabbing 5.6 them per game this season in only 14 minutes per game, translating to roughly 15 per 36 minute average, regularly is a top 5 offensive rebounder, an absolutely tremendous and tenacious rebounder, and would definitely be a big time upgrade for their team in regard to rebounding. But even for defense, showed during the postseason that he does have something left in the tank, blocked a lot of shots and actually a lot more than usual for him, even moving his feet fairly well and switching on defense a little bit. Adams showed that he's not washed up and can be an effective rebounder and defender. Now unfortunately is not the best lob threat or a 3-point shooting option, but is a good pick and roll partner, is a great rebounder, pretty good defender, and a very reliable veteran option. I think that would translate to him being worth the full mid-level and would be a great fit for their team in my opinion. But then for option number 2, taking a look at a guy like Santi Aldama here for example, is a restricted free agent, but if they could somehow pry him away from Memphis, that would be big for their team. And it might be possible with a full 4-year non-taxpayer mid-level exception offer, which would come out to roughly $61 million over that 4-year duration. And yes, he definitely would be worth it in my opinion. After all, he is only 24 years old and showing continual improvement, coming off career highs in points per game with 12.5, rebounds per game with 6.4, assists per game with 2.9, field goal percentage with 48.3%, and 3-point percentage with 36.8%. So all across the board here, showing improvement offensively and even defensively too. maybe not the best rim protector, but is switchable on defense, is 6'11" and can move his feet fairly well, so can play at both power forward and center, offering both ability to start a game at power forward or then to finish a game at center. And with versatility being the name of the game, that's obviously a big time benefit. I think he'd be a great pick and roll partner or even pick and pop partner with Luka Doncic. Santi Aldama can really do both. Between the great 3-point shooting, like I said, 37% at over 4 attempts per game last season, very impressive for a big, or then even being a lob threat, maybe not the best one, but definitely is a fairly solid lob threat, fairly athletic for his size and does have good timing. I think that would make him a great partner with Luka Doncic, and like I said, at only 24, could be a long-term partner for him too. Now it might be difficult to pry him away, and Memphis probably would match that contract, but I definitely think about offering it to him. I mean, if we're talking about a big and one that actually would be in their price range, which again, Miles Turner unfortunately is not, maybe an option to be a sign and trade, but not an outright free agent signing, then I think Santi Aldama might be their best option. Is young, is a lob threat, is a 3-point shooting option, and both a power forward center hybrid. I think he would be worth that contract if he would take it and if Memphis would match it. But apart from him, like I said, they could offer part of that mid-level to a different free agent, maybe offering part of it to a guy like Paul Reed, for example, maybe a guy like Kevon Looney, any of the guys I mentioned from the veteran minimum part or the taxpayer mid-level exception part, offering part of it to them, and that could potentially be a good option too. But with all of that being said here, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the Lakers center options from a veteran minimum contract standpoint, from a taxpayer mid-level exception standpoint, and then if they would actually get the full mid-level, who do you sign with that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one, and if you enjoyed the video, then I'll greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day or night.